is an article. This was an undercover investigation that was conducted by Jordana Seal and published through the Daily Mail, which is pretty interesting. And I want to read this article because it's really interesting and it reveals so much. And once again, it continues to validate what so many people, former members and activists and journalists and people such as myself have been saying about this organization, pointing out the problems, because this is an undercover investigation of an Opus Dei like center, basically, where people live. And this happened over in the UK, but Opus Dei is a global organization, and if there's one thing I think you can count on, it's that they replicate themselves pretty much identically wherever they go. And so if something is true in one place, more than likely there's when we're talking about like structurally and that kind of thing, the day-to-day life, how life is ordered for the members and everything like that, if it is one way in one place, it's most likely going to be the same in another geographical place. And I think that it's important to keep that in mind, because that lies at the crux of the case of the 43 women in Argentina, 43 members who are alleging that they were labor trafficked. The Argentine federal government is now taken up the case and is bringing charges against leadership, Opus Dei leadership in the country and everything. And the thing about that case, and what is so important to remember, is that while it is landlocked to Argentina, it is not a solely like Argentinian problem, or it does not just exist in this one like random outlier. And I've seen a number of attempts by Opus Dei and people supportive of Opus Dei and people who just generally don't seem to like to see religious organizations getting called out for the toxic and harmful things that they've done, that this case with the 43 is some like outlier, far out example that's like happening somewhere. There's these 43 random people and their lawyer that are trying to cause problems, but that's not actually being honest about the scope of the situation. And the scope of the situation, the way that I understand and believe it to be, and the perspective and position of numerous victim survivors, is that that situation in Argentina is emblematic of a systemic issue within the organization globally. And so while Opus Dei might like to just have everyone believe that it's this random outlier case that is in no way, shape, or form indicative of anything else within the organization, I am of a very different opinion. A lot of people are of a very different opinion. And this article, coming from an English-speaking country out of the UK, certainly reinforces that perspective. And I think you'll see what I mean as I read through this. So the headline says, Britain's school for tradwives who are married to God. Jordana Seal goes undercover at secretive Catholic sect Opus Dei, where young women give up their careers to cook and clean for men they never see, take a vow of celibacy, and punish themselves. This was published on March 28th. To crowds strolling along Maresfield Gardens, nestled in the heart of leafy Hampstead, there is nothing noteworthy about Lakefield Hospitality Training College. So this is a domestic training school, which is something that I've talked about quite a bit and have interviewed people who have gone through these facilities. But anyway, the ugliest building on a street flanked by a £1.5 million red brick townhouse and imposing mansions, you could quite easily ignore it altogether on your way to pick up a pastry at one of the many artisan bakeries a short stroll away. But let me see if I can make this. No, the text is like really close to the line and almost cutting it off, but I think you guys can still see to read along. Lakefield isn't just a cookery school. In fact, it's a multi-million-pound gated complex run by one of the world's most notorious Christian sects, Opus Dei. Referred to as a cult by former female members, Opus Dei has recently been at the center of high-profile slavery, sexual misconduct, and financial fraud allegations in Catholic countries, including Italy, Ireland, and Argentina. However, in the UK, they operate in the shadows, owning multiple properties in Glasgow, Manchester, Oxford, and London, London, alongside women-only university halls of residence in the heart of London and Manchester. As part of a 5-month investigation, a Daily Mail journalist posed as a university graduate seeking guidance from a female member of the sect living inside the Hampstead property that has a fingerprint scanner on its front door. And the thing that I wonder, what immediately pops into my head when I read that, is whether or not there is a fingerprint scanner on the other side. Because a feature of these like Opus Dei residences, particularly the ones where male members live and where female only assistant numerary servant members care for their every need and whim, there is a feature of these like double locked, double barricaded doors, complicated systems of locks and methods basically intended to keep the men and the women separate at all times. I mean, they can't even acknowledge each other like when they're bringing meals at like mealtime or anything like that. It's something that when I interviewed former assistant numerary Anne Marie Allen, who wrote a book about her experience being an Opus Dei in Ireland, in her book, which is called Serve, and you should read it or listen to it, she talks about these like double barricaded doors where there were locks on both sides. Now this is taking things, you know, to the talking about a fingerprint scanner on the front door. That's upgrading things to like the 21st century here. But I have reason to question whether or not the same sort of modus operandi isn't still in place, where on the other side of that door, you also have to scan your finger to be able to leave. And that means that there's someone controlling access. Certainly there's someone controlling entry, which is not necessarily a bad thing on the face of it. Like, I don't have a problem with people securing their homes or their places of work or anything like that. But, you know, we're talking about an organization that has been accused of being very controlling and overbearing in the lives of its members, including not permitting them to leave at will. So, again, is there a fingerprint scanner on the other side of that door? I would be very interested to know. In echoes of Margaret Atwood's dystopian novel, The Handmaid's Tale, we found that a group of young women live inside, spending long days cooking and cleaning for more than 40 male university students and priests, but are banned from speaking to them. The female devotees live a life of celibacy and are encouraged to wear a painful spiked metal garter around their legs as a form of penance and commitment to God. Their leisure time is also controlled, and while they are permitted to drink alcohol at social events, they are only allowed to watch U-rated Disney films on television. And those social events, I don't think are, like, multitudinous. Our reporter was offered mentoring by Erin. There's an asterisk there, so I'm assuming that name was changed to protect her identity. A bespectacled girl on the cusp of 30 who had given up a successful career in lab research to join Opus Dei. She explained that women living inside the home are consumed by their duties to male students, working 6 days a week with just 1 day off while living in adjoining halls of residence called Netherthal House. Inside the pristine residence, there are stacks of freshly starched shirts, boxer shorts, and trousers draped across the second floor. But despite this dedication to male residents who live just yards away, Erin admitted that she had never met them in person. Wearing a modest engagement ring to symbolize her spiritual calling, Erin compared herself to a mother who would selflessly care for her family. Yeah, except that when you're caring for a family, you're actually allowed to, like, communicate with your family and have relationships with your family members in, like, a free and open, like, exchange of, like, ideas and thoughts and everything, which I am not under the impression happens in Opus Dei in any way, shape, or form. So if it is a family, it seems like a very, very dysfunctional one to me. And I don't think it's surprising that people report having so many problems once they're in it, because it is so incredibly dysfunctional. The key difference being that Erin, who met our reporter every week for a month, had taken a vow of celibacy as soon as she joined Opus Dei. I'm not going to get married because as an organization, we always need people who can give their lives to actually run the things, she explained. Within the Opus Dei centers, there are some people who choose to give up their professional job and work in the home, like the work of a mother. So we look after all the catering and the management of the house itself. That becomes our profession. We don't live together, but it's the same complex. We don't see them, it's separate. They have their own dining room. We have ours. So here on the screen, this is a picture of the spiked chain that is worn around the member's leg. It's called a sillis. And then this cloth rope here is called the discipline. And they use them to mortify their flesh. Because in Opus Dei, there's this idea that you constantly have to be like hyper vigilant against your every thought and every emotion. You have to constantly be like actively engaging with like examining your conscience and every little small thought and notion that pops into it, so that you can then go and when you have your chat with your spiritual director, you can tell them all of your like innermost thoughts and feelings, ostensibly under the guise of providing spiritual direction. But I believe, and many former members have said, that it's really just a way to collect information on members and to enforce a surveillance state, essentially, in which members are themselves the prisoners and also the guards of the prison. Here's a picture of the front. It says Lakefield Hospitality Training College on it. They have like a bulletin board here advertising something called like a family cook-along. And other events here. It says like other dates. I'm sure nothing about Opus Dei on this Lakefield Hospitality Training College sign or on their bulletin board, I am sure. Here's the chapel on the inside. And then they had a picture. I scrolled past it. Here's that door that has the thumbprint reader right here. If you're watching on video, if you're listening, it's a wooden door and it has like just an unassuming handle, but you can see like the little black circular thumb scanner right above the handle. Anybody who's worked in any type of like building that had security or anything like that, I'm sure you're familiar, seen something like that. And again, I don't have any issue with it. Like you gotta keep your things secured and everything. And I obviously am in support of that. But I really would be interested to know like who all's thumbprint is accepted in that door. Is it everybody who lives there, or is it only a few people who have been deemed as like responsible enough to have access to the door to exit the compound? I think you could see how this potentially, and I'm not saying it is this way because I don't know, I don't live there, but I think you can see how this could potentially become a very toxic situation very quickly. Aaron said some women chose to work outside the accommodation, which has been operating since 1962, but as a result have to pay Opus Dei residence fees. Meanwhile, she lives there for free and is paid not very much, but enough. Does she have full control of her finances? Or is she expected to hand them over to her the directress, basically? Because that is something that a lot of former members have talked about, that especially in modern times, that yeah, sure, they are paid and they have an electronic paper trail showing that there's funds being deposited into their accounts, but they either don't have control of the accounts or they are required to transfer a sizable portion of their income to the Opus Dei Center. The women typically spend all their downtime together in a shared living room watching U-rated films deemed acceptable by senior members of the sect, because you can't make those determinations for yourself in this environment. Everything has to be determined for you because you're a silly little woman and you can't do that for yourself. Can't use your silly little brain. Throughout the mentorship, our reporter was encouraged to lie to her family, partake in self-harm rituals, and hounded about the importance of connecting to God through menial housework. Quote, "We're all sinners, and we have to make up for it," Aaron preached in one session, and the people who live celibate lives can use traditional means, meaning in this case self-harm, to do so. She went on to describe corporal mortification, whipping yourself, and wearing a spiky garter known as a sillis as normal in the church, and explained that it's an act decided between the member and their spiritual director. Well, I disagree with her statement that it is these corporal mortifications are a normal feature of like Catholic church life, because that was certainly not my experience at all. And I had a very, very, very conservative Catholic upbringing, and I was very familiar with the stories of church saints who did use corporal mortification as a part of their spiritual practice, like St. Thomas More, who got beheaded by King Henry VIII. He was really popular for having worn a hair shirt as part of his mortification. And then there have been other saints as well who have done all sorts of things, everything from the Silis and the discipline and the hair shirt to more extreme, less extreme types of mortifications that are intended to purify the flesh and bring you closer to God ultimately. And while there is a history in the church of people having used these kind of extreme mortifications, like the Silis or a hair shirt, that typically is not something, based on my understanding and what I was told growing up, it's not something that the Catholic Church really encourages most people do today. One, because there are already so many other ways for you to mortify yourself if you want to. You know, you could simply give up coffee, or start skipping desserts on Fridays, or abstain from watching any type of like secular media entertainment except for the weekends, or whatever. Like, there's already all of these different ways that Catholics can get creative about like mortifying themselves, but it's not necessary to go the extra step of actually physically harming yourself, which, if taken to their extreme ends, and many people have and do, these methods of mortification will hurt you. The spike chain will cut your skin open. The whip can leave welts and bruises, I am sure, especially if you're someone like me who like can just be barely touched, and I bruise like a peach. So like, I can only imagine for somebody like me, something like that, it will cause physical harm and even lasting damage. I mean, I've read stories on like Opus Libris, for example, from people who talk about how they still have scars on their thighs from where they wore that Silis day after day, years on end, while they were in Opus Dei. It's not really something the Catholic Church encourages. And there may be outlier examples and situations where people on a one-on-one case basis decide to do something, and maybe they have some guidance from a spiritual director. I don't really know. But to say that these things are normal in the church is wrong. Now, they may be normal in the church of Opus Dei, but they're not normal in the Catholic Church, right? Because Opus Dei has been accused of being a church within a church, being a church hiding within the Catholic Church and taking Catholic Church teachings and kind of running with them and inventing their own twist and translation on them. So I disagree wholeheartedly with the idea that that's normal. It's not normal. This is not normal. Normal Catholics are not doing this kind of thing by and large. Most women in the house are numeraries, celibate members who are banned from interacting with men. Inferior to them are their less educated celibate counterparts, assistant numeraries. Quote, the assistant numeraries are the only ones who ever see the boys, the numerary said. When they're in the dining hall, they, the boys, have a bell in case they need something. If they ring the bell, the assistant numeraries go in like waitresses. Their routine consists of serving strangers through a shared door that opens onto a huge dining room. Multiple times a day, the women set dozens of round tables and set out homemade food before locking themselves away. They'll then proceed to clean up, sift through huge bags of washing carelessly left for them. They do all of this while wearing a Silis. Comparing intermittent fasting and trendy cold plunging to punishing herself with cold showers and depriving herself of sugar, the numerary justified sacrifice for spiritual means. She said, it's normal for people to make sacrifices for an aim. Yeah, but this isn't quite the same thing. Here's a picture, here's one of the founder himself in all his glory, and then here's a picture of the street that this training center is on. Very pretty. And then here's a screenshot from their webpage. It says, as a female only NVQ from 18 to 24 years old, Lakefield Hospitality College is dedicated to empowering you, young woman, on your journey towards success. We're here to support you every step of the way. Join us and let us help you unlock your full potential. And they have two courses you choose from, either professional cookery or hospitality service. And I would be very curious to know what their graduation rate is like, how many people, graduates of this these programs have gone on to seek employment outside of Opus Dei in other for other businesses or other entities, because that's another like feature and bug, is the fact that these like courses and things seem to serve as more of a recruitment means than as a way to actually educate people for gainful employment. Erin told our reporter she had her mini conversion from standard Catholicism to Opus Dei at university. So say even in here, they're admitting that like Opus Dei is something else besides just Catholic. It's not just Catholic. It's gone an extra little distance. And she had her mini conversion to it while she was living in private halls of residence while she was going to university that were owned by the sect. And isn't that a tale as old as time as well? Stories abound from people who only encountered or learned about Opus Dei after they agreed to living in this private hall of residence that they needed to live in while they were going to university to save money, or because they wanted to be in a more like home-like environment, or whatever the case may be, who don't hear a whisper about Opus Dei until they have already moved in and are living there. And then Opus Dei starts making an appearance. So, of course, Erin discovered Opus Dei while she was at university and living in a residence that the organization owns. Of course. Discussing the central London halls called Ashwell House, she said they started the university residence with the aim of helping people that age. So when you live there, you get all of the things that they offer. That may be true, but again, also I feel like there is a recruitment element at play in this as well, because it just seems like, I'm sure there are examples, but I just have not heard any, of people who already knew that these student residences were Opus Dei student residences because maybe they had come from an Opus Dei supernumerary family and their parents are super involved. All the kids have always been super involved in like the extracurriculars and things, which are often facilitated through these student residences and such, so that once they reached the age of attending university, they were already planning to live there while they were going to university. I'm sure that does happen, but that doesn't seem to be the norm. The norm is that people are sort of between a rock and a hard place, or need accommodation so that they can further their education, and they sort of get shuffled and encouraged into moving into this residence, where they then hear about Opus Dei for the first time, even when some of these people were friends with people who were members of Opus Dei for a couple of years before they moved into that residence. So all of that really contributes to this feeling that these residences are not there so much to provide a place for someone to live, as they are a really handy way for Opus Dei to gather similar people together who are the type of people that they want to recruit, to target for recruitment. So Erin says, I went to Imperial College London, and even though it's a good university, the only thing the students, did after classes was drink, so I didn't get to do anything. But I had really good friends in Ashwell. It's a place where I feel safe. Under the guise of providing female students with an alternative to UK university party culture, teenage girls are encouraged to move into the sect's central London accommodation in bustling Shoreditch and live by an ultra-strict set of rules. This includes restrictions on speaking to male students and rarely leaving the accommodation alone, enforced by members of staff who live inside the halls. And as Opus Dei's grip on the girls intensifies through therapy sessions known as spiritual accompaniment, the rules escalate into mortification rituals or penances, with the women whipping themselves, taking ice-cold showers, and wearing spiky garters, as well as also, I don't know if it mentions this later, but sleeping on boards instead of on a mattress or on the floor, because apparently women are just so sensuous that they have to like basically be abused in order to like be kept in line, which is just one example of Jose Maria Escriva's misogyny. Eventually, they are encouraged to abandon career aspirations and dedicate themselves to a vocation centered around the sect. For women, the options are limited to caring for male contemporaries or raising a family. Quote, I worked for 2 years after I graduated to get experience of the real world, Erin said. Now I'm grateful that I have seen the world so I can help more people. And I think that that is a really interesting thing to say, because Opus Dei likes to present itself as an organization of people that are living in the world, right? The whole idea is supposed to be that your work and your career and your family are your vocation, and you live out this vocation while being in the world. So it's a little strange to me that an Opus Dei member would need to go into the real world to get experience of the real world and to then come back to Opus Dei. Because based on the things that Opus Dei has said, the real world should be like alive and well in Opus Dei, should it not? Because people are living their vocation in the real world. No? But I think in reality, and again, I think this is a self-tell, we know that isn't true. And even the members themselves know that that isn't true, that what they are existing in within these Opus Dei centers, living this Opus Dei life, is not in any way reflective or emblematic of society as a whole. It's something that's very, very different and very, very counter. And Opus Dei has wasted a lot of paper trying to drive that like fact home and to convince everyone that it is this organization in the world, real people with real lives in the real world. But the reality is quite a bit different. Dogged by high-profile allegations internationally, Opus Dei has also had a troubled recent relationship with the Vatican. The late Pope Francis scrapped its privileged status in 2023 following claims of abuse in Chile and reduced its control over Basilica headquarters in Aragon. Now, how Pope Leo chooses to address the sect remains unanswered, and any form of regulation in the UK seems far from becoming a reality. And then here is a picture of Tina Fogarty, who was recruited at 16 years old to a boys' residence in Ireland to be an assistant numerary, to be a slave, a servant for this organization. And she has spent so much time and energy speaking out and seeking justice and attempting to hold this organization responsible for the things that it's done. She is amazing. Opus Dei is notoriously secretive and hard to infiltrate. Recently, multiple women from Argentina and Ireland claimed they were exploited as children by the religious offshoot and made to become domestic slaves for elite male members between 1972 and 2015. During their testimonies, they accused the organization of promising their poor families it would provide the girls with an education, but instead made them work grueling 12-hour days with no pay inside Opus Dei centers. Tina Fogarty, who grew up in Ballyrome, a small village in Laos, Ireland, was recruited at just 16 years old in a boys' residence in Ireland, cooking and cleaning for at times up to 150 people. Growing up in poverty and with strict Irish Catholic parents, she was offered a place on a 2-year catering course with the promise of a job afterwards. However, decades later, when she finally escaped their grasp, she had no qualifications and barely any money. She told the Daily Mail, quote, "It was a repeated indoctrination, and a lot of the time it was done through fun, and then they make a big thing about being a part of the family. But it's this continuous coercion that doesn't appear to be dangerous on the surface, but it is." Founded in 1928 by a Spanish Roman Catholic priest called Jose Maria Escriva, Opus Dei aimed to promote holiness in ordinary life. There again, saying the whole living in the world, the holiness in ordinary life. You shouldn't need to go out into the world as a member of Opus Dei to be a member of Opus Dei. You should just already be there, using their own logic. The sect has since been established in 66 countries and has around 90,000 members who, in accordance with Escriva's teachings, must commit to a life of intense work, prayer, and asceticism. It acts as an institution within the Catholic Church, offering theologically conservative spiritual guidance to its members. Opus Dei literally translates to the work of God because it aims it to focus on the idea that members can find holiness through mundane everyday life. In the UK, there are centres in London, Manchester, Oxford, and Glasgow where celibate members either live or work. But joining Opus Dei is not easy. The 6-year process begins with a letter of admission to the prelate in Rome. This is followed by a ceremony 6 months later called the admission. A year later, the oblation occurs where members formally commit themselves, which is renewed yearly on March 19th. After 6.5 years, the recruit will then take part in the Fidelity, a small ceremony where they dedicate themselves to a vocation in Opus Dei for the rest of their lives. The organization is known to provide spiritual direction to school children through youth clubs via charities set up by members. And allegedly, these charities are just the totally independent ventures of these members and are completely unaffiliated in any way with Opus Dei, but Unsurprisingly, probably I don't believe them when they say that. As of 1982, when it received Vatican-approved status, anyone under the age of 18 was banned from formally joining. However, children aged 14 and a half can still become junior candidates if they write a letter to the head of the sect requesting admission, a process referred to as whistling. And I think anytime anyone writes a letter requesting admission, it is called whistling. But the reality of this junior candidates category is a fact, and something that it is really important to keep in mind whenever Opus Dei doubles down on statements that it does not target anyone under the age of 18 for recruitment. Because I think that it is backwards for you to say something like that, and then for you to turn around and talk about how you have this junior candidate category that children 14 and a half years of age and maybe even younger are able to apply for. Well, then what happens? Then they start getting all of the prerequisite Opus Dei talking points delivered into their ears. And wouldn't it stand to reason that that's where the grooming starts, so that by the time they reach the age of 18, they're ready to kick right over to a vocation that they've already been convinced that they have? It would seem that way to me. And I don't think that an organization that has been accused of the kinds of things that Opus Dei has been accused of has any business interacting with anyone under the age of 18 in any way, shape, or form. That is just my opinion, but I hold it very firmly. I think this organization is toxic, particularly to children, and that children should have absolutely nothing to do with it. And I think that putting a child in an Opus Dei environment, honestly, I think it could be viewed as spiritual and mental abuse, frankly. Here is a picture from inside the Ashwell house of a student praying. There's no mention of Opus Dei in the video that they say there. And then this is a clip from this same promotional video, which shows students being given an opportunity to mentor young girls. Children aged 14 and a half can still become junior candidates if they write a letter to the head of the sect requesting admission. This is for the Bay Tree Center, mentoring young girls. This is one afternoon per week for 1 hour. Contact this person here at this number. And they got tabs to pulled, and all but 2 of them have been pulled off, which means that there are kids going to be showing up at this Opus Dei center. And then this is the pristine entrance in Lakefield, where women spend their days cooking and cleaning. And I can tell you the reason it is pristine is because the women who are cooking and cleaning there are the ones who are doing the cleaning. For 18-year-olds enrolling in university, there are 2 women-only Opus Dei affiliated accommodations, Ashwell House in London and Coniston Halls in Manchester. Discussing how students enroll there, Aaron said, because it is Ashwell, it starts with an A, so it comes quite early in the list of accommodation on university websites. Only the half of the people there went there on purpose. Again, what was I saying? People are not seeking this place out because they want to live in an Opus Dei house. They're seeking it out because they need somewhere to live while they're going to university. And Opus Dei is not being upfront about the fact that it's an Opus Dei house. So students are not discovering that fact until they've already signed like a lease agreement to pay rent to live there, and have already like paid a deposit, and have already made all of these decisions and things that are very difficult to walk back, especially when you're in the middle of a very busy academic school year. It's not a situation that sets these people up for success, frankly, in my opinion. The halls of residence are purposely ambiguous about their association with Opus Dei, with most students enrolling by chance. It mentions Opus Dei on their website sparingly, disclosing that it has a role in Ashwell House's pastoral care and that the family atmosphere is inspired by the sect's founder Escriva, claiming participating in Ashwell's Christian formation offered is optional. But is it actually optional? In a promotional video uploaded to YouTube 9 years ago, beaming students described the accommodation as a family away from family, failing to mention any connection to the cult-like organization. I think that's a problem. I think that at best, that is a lie of omission. The only hints that the accommodation has any sort of religious affiliation is one clip showing a girl praying and a gold-framed image of a priest propped in between a group of girls sipping tea on the sofa. Students praise the staff, who they have regular catch-ups with, and reveal they take part in community projects, which includes mentoring young girls. And why do you think they're mentoring the young girls? Is it because they care about the professional and personal success of these young people as they're moving into their adult life? Or is it because this organization is on a rampage for power and money and influence, and fresh blood is an integral part of keeping the whole charade afloat? Could it be? Quote, if you are a woman with ambitions open to the bigger questions in life, then Ashwell is the place where you will flourish, they claim, implying that if you're open to these bigger questions, there are going to be conversations being had about these bigger questions, but that doesn't also seem to be really happening either. Vulnerability and innocence are textbook qualities that Opus Dei look for in new recruits, Tina explained. If you're a young woman, maybe away from home for the first time, there's already a vulnerability there, Tina said. Everything is new. Your studies are new, you're getting to know a peer group, trying to fit in, and then you have this residence that appears to be super friendly and supportive. You're targeted. It seems okay on the surface, but there begins the process of grooming, and it's relentless. They don't give up. Girls living in the discounted halls are charged £242 a week in central London, a bargain compared to nearby Unite halls, which charge £460 a week, excluding meals, cleaning services, and facilities. So there's an incentive for people to choose these houses. And the incentive is not, I want to be in a Catholic environment, I want to be in an Opus Dei environment. The incentive is the fact that it's cheaper, which means you're going to be getting a kind of person in there who is sort of vulnerable. Are they not? Someone who's in a vulnerable financial situation, who needs to live somewhere like this because they can't maybe afford to live somewhere else where the rent is so much higher. I think that induces a kind of like forced vulnerability, like right from the outset, which is really feels unsavory and gross to me. It is advertised on social media as a home away from home and has its own Instagram account where it shares curated group pictures of neat university students giggling over brunch and gingerbread houses. I also think that Opus Dei's like very reductive perspective on people, and specifically on women, is like very evident in all of this as well. I mean, if the like female only servant class of Opus Dei wasn't evidence enough, there's also a lot of former members have talked about how they were encouraged, former female members specifically here, I'm saying, were encouraged to be like, have like an innocent sort of childlike demeanor, to be very like girly and kind of silly, and to be sort of like spineless and fearful of the world, and just like a wilting violet, like in every sense of the word, because apparently that was the idea that Escriva had of women in his own mind, because again, he's the fount from which all of this poison flows. This organization's structure and charism and everything were created, curated by Escriva, and have been kept in place by subsequent prelates, or whatever they're being called now. I guess they've lost their prelate title, but the heads of Opus Dei have maintained that same in perspective and environment, and that is evidenced through the testimonies that former female members give about being discouraged from like thinking critically and really engaging with like complex, nuanced subjects. Discussions about politics, maybe weren't necessarily encouraged. And they talk about in this video that's promoting, or on their social media, where they promote this home away from home with no mention of Opus Dei. It's all about having these, neat university students who are giggling over brunch and gingerbread houses. Because in Opus Dei's mind, I think there's like a caricature of a person. This like there are these archetypal caricatures of how people are supposed to behave and act. And it's applied to men as well. Men are victims of Opus Dei's misogyny the exact same way that women are. It impacts and manifests in different ways. And we're talking about a women's house here. So that is why I'm speaking from like a woman's perspective. But don't think for one moment that I think that men are like totally unaffected by this environment, by being treated as like these boys who need to be cleaned up and picked up after by these women who they can't even talk to. Like, it's not a positive environment for them either. It's negative for men as well. Men have negative consequences and negative outcomes from their exposure and experiences with the organization too. Misogyny affects us all. That's the takeaway here. But I'm not surprised that, rather than focusing on the fact that it's a Catholic affiliated house that is affiliated with a very specific organization, they would prefer to just focus on the airy curbside appeal, which is just giggling and gingerbread houses. And it feels very reductive and insulting too. These women are young women who are pursuing higher education. So they're not, you could, conclude they're not silly or simple-minded people. They're people who want to ask the big questions and dig into the real answers. And sad to say, but I'm not getting the impression of a domestic environment that would encourage that in any way, shape, or form. Here are some more pictures of the outside of Ashwell House, and then living room at Ashwell House. I mean, it's very lovely, right? It's beautifully curated, modern furniture. Their cable management there of the TV is kind of out of control, but maybe that's an American thing. I don't know. It's a nice place, and you can see why people would be attracted to it, especially because it is so much cheaper than the other options in the area. But look, like, there's not a single religious photo anywhere, like, in here whatsoever. Nothing to alert you to the fact that this is a facility owned and operated by a very conservative Catholic organization. When our reporter visited Ashwell House, posing as a prospective student, a female member of staff called a domestic services manager explained that the price included 2 hot meals a day and laundry is done for the students by workers. Students living in Ashwell are promised a new family in a city where they know no one and are given small roles tying themselves to the group, including brunch committee. She said, "We all do everything, and every girl has a job in the house. We eat together. You don't dribble in and dribble out. You come, sit down, talk to one another. No set places, and as people begin to group together, we split you up so that everyone gets to know everyone. That means you have a big group of people who become friends." So on the surface of it, that sounds really, really nice. And I don't necessarily think that, like, again, on the surface of it, that's an indication of anything nefarious, but because we are so aware of the organization at question here, which is Opus Dei, and all of the problematic issues under that umbrella, I think it is interesting that the students who end up living here are expected to toe the line almost immediately out the gate. And on the face of it, that sounds nice and everything. But because of the organization that we're talking about here, it's really hard not to feel like there's something a little bit devious going on there. And also, it sounds very nice to sit down and have, like, family meals and everything like that. But what is that, like, family environment actually like? I mean, there's so much talk about this being a new family and everything. But what is that family environment actually like? I mean, because if it's completely toxic and untenable, then what's the upside there? There's absolutely no upside. Says that as their dedication towards the family intensifies, so do the religious expectations. And this is exactly what I am talking about. On the face of it, it seems fine to have, like, this student residence where things are structured to save costs, and one of the ways that costs are saved is by having students chip in to help with, like, the upkeep of the place. On the face of it, I don't necessarily think that that's a bad idea, because I think you can, incorporate some kind of cool life lessons and life skills and things in there if that's done properly. But again, my impression of this and of the, like, Opus Dei student residence model in general is not an impression of a residence that is intended to, like, give students this all-encompassing, like, university experience that's going to really set them up for success, as much as it is, like I said, about creating this conduit, this pipeline, where you now have a pool of people to recruit from. And the reason why I feel like that is probably the case is because, they said earlier that participating in, like, the religious or spiritual formation was supposed to be optional. for people living at this house who are not all going to be Catholic, because people are not choosing this because they know what it is. They're choosing it because it's a cheaper place to live. So then there's this expectation, the longer that you're there, that, oh, well, if you're going to help with this, well, maybe you can help with this thing too. And, oh, well, a bunch of us are getting together on Thursday for our weekly circle, and you should really come to that. If you're going to really succeed here and have like a successful educational career, we really think that you should be coming to these. And there's all this pressure that starts to be built. This intensifying religious expectation. Daily Mass, bearing their souls to the numeraries that work there, and learning how to clean priests' garments become as integrated into their lifestyle as Saturday night pajama parties. The religion centers around rigid hierarchical structures, which sees males and females as living separate celibate lives unless they are married, in which case they must focus on the sanctification of their family duties. Tina explained that Opus Dei pre-assign the category of each new recruit falls into, steering them into a specific direction accordingly. It's the needs of the organization. Whatever they need, they're going to plug you in where they need you at, which is why nobody ever independently discerns that they have a vocation to this organization. They're always told that they have a vocation by someone who's already in the organization. And it's never a vocation of their own choosing. It's, oh, we see that you have a vocation to be an assistant numerary, and you have to obey this vocation because it's coming from God. And if you don't obey this vocation, then you and your family will suffer tremendously for it. Tina explained, pre-assigned the category that new recruits fall into. Speaking from a quiet town in Spain, where she moved to after escaping the sect, Tina said, as soon as they interact with you, you have a label over your head. They make this big kind of a sort of a thing about making you feel like, oh, you're a part of the family now, you're in the know. You feel a little bit a part of the club, so they kind of closed ranks around me and separated me a little bit from everybody else. They were also telling me that they thought that I should be an assistant numerary. Tina was told by a senior member of Opus Dei, anyone can get married and have kids. That's not terribly noble. Which sounds like it was said by someone who is not married and does not have their own children. Because I think anybody who's actually done that would be able to tell you how incredibly challenging it is to be married and have children and raise a family. Like, one of the hardest things a person can ever do. So anyone who's ever done that would never say that it's like not a terribly noble thing to do, because it's difficult to have a family and to raise a family well, and to raise a family well is very noble. But you wouldn't know that if you took a vow of celibacy when you were 14 and a half years old and were never allowed to have any life experiences and were only fed information that was in line with your dogmatic and fanatical groupthink. Aaron told our reporter that Opus Dei is split into regions. The UK is grouped with Sweden, Ireland, and the Netherlands. Each region is dictated by a group of 9 men or women, depending on gender, called the advisory. They control where each member lives and works. Education and power is essential for members of the advisory, who will typically have PhDs, while married members, known as supernumeraries, are expected to have high-power jobs with large earning potential to donate to the organization. As the hierarchy trickles down, so do the educational expectations of each member. Priests and numeraries must have a degree, while assistant numeraries can remain uneducated. So there's quite a bit of disparity there between the options that are available to these different groups of people. And it's not a disparity that's being chosen freely by those people. It's a predetermined structural feature. Both men and women can become numeraries, while the male numeraries use their time to pursue the studies required for priesthood. Tina escaped nearly 30 years ago after enduring years of emotional trauma from the age of just 16, and even brought civil claims against the sect for personal injury in the UK and Ireland. She has since created a life for herself in Spain, where she lives with her partner and dog, and is even considering enrolling in university to gain the degree and education Opus Dei deprived her of. Reflecting on her time in the sect as a teen, Tina warned, when your spirit is broken and your health is not good, you kind of don't know how to resist or fight. A spokesman for Opus Dei said, Opus Dei deny these allegations or as false or taken out of context, and are open for the Daily Mail to speak directly to residents in Lakefield or Ashwell House to verify the truth of the matter. Totally unsurprising statement from them. So this article was really, really interesting. Somebody went undercover for however long to gain all of this information and insight, which is just absolutely fascinating. Shout out to Jordana Seal for doing that, and shout out to Tina Fogarty for being a part of this investigation, for lending her perspective and insight as a former assistant numerary member of Opus Dei. And yeah, I all love and support to all of the victim survivors who have been working so hard, speaking out. People like Tina and Anne Marie and so many other people all around the world, because this is not landlocked to a specific region. And as someone who has become something of a lifelong student herself, I am a big believer in access to information and in public education and everything. And getting an education does so many things for you beyond just like the immediate obvious, like giving you a certification or something like that, because it molds your mind and your person into someone who can better articulate themselves, better convey ideas, complex ideas, and also just opens your mind to the world. So to anyone listening, if you've been on the fence, if you're thinking about going back to school, you've been on the fence about it, I hope that you will take this as the encouragement to do so, because I'm a believer in it, and it's a powerful thing.